I'm going to begin with an ekphrastic poem. This took a first place a few years ago with the Poetry Society of Michigan for their ekphrastic category. And it was based on an exhibit at the Milwaukee Art Museum of old tattoos. And back in the 1940s, there were like a lot of mermaid tattoos. And I thought they were just fascinating. So this poem is called Mermaid Tattoo Becomes Enmeshed in Her Relationship. I was crafted carefully and with cunning to link my ink to this relentless red flow, nailed down to the pulse. Like a seashell ocean's echo, my two dimensions bend and arch. They ache to the rhythm of his three as I'm plastered flat to a twining twitch of muscle. And deeper down, I sense the bone I cannot grasp. It makes my stomach turn. And yet, my tiny nipples burn. I yearn for him, trapped beneath the death of him as his outer layer flakes away, and I'm the only witness. We hover over women with their open legs like rowboat oars, the wretched separation. Distantly, they beg for us and gnash their teeth. We heave and sweat the salty sea and thrash, a flash of scale on spangled tail, till his eyes roll back and stare through mine. And so these first few poems I'm reading are coming from this chapbook, Staring Through My Eyes. So the title of the chapbook comes from that poem. This second poem is also an ekphrastic poem. It was a picture of a photograph of an old dilapidated duplex, but I grew up in a row house, so there was a lot of like similarity I could work with. This is Duplex. Duped by a rectangle of glass above the door, in the way its light came in, but we could not see out. Like the eyeless yellow marigolds between our walks, all fringe and no insight, tough alchemy of the nearly defeated. Sometimes a warmed patch of light drifted in to land on dust-mote winter days. We played with paper dolls. Our fathers once reshingled the dilapidated roof. Outside our back doors were sets of stairs they had agreed upon. Edgy summers drummed time, the staccato whap whap of screen doors. Our lives latched to the people next door in the jumpy bang bang of summer. I used to dream of a house I could run all the way around, timed myself over and over. We shared a chimney. Devilish bats would echo their way down its dusty tunnel and then have to decide. Sometimes we heard the neighbors' shrieks at night, and sometimes they heard ours. Okay, this next poem, a few years ago, it got the second place for the Hal Prize, and it's called Mountjoy Homeless. Solitary car dweller, rocked out dropout, once galloped alleyways of honeysuckle summer. We were all storytellers back then, and he most of all. His exuberance would spin colors of taffy to fill your mouth, cling to teeth the way we clutched our sides in unbearable laughter, or like his butterflies pressed under plates of glass, traced with fingers. He'd understand my impulse to write this story from my Midwestern prairie desk, of the unhinged Oldsmobile just outside Mount Joy, left in the thicket of hemlock beside November's chilly creek. As a boy, he chased butterflies through July's bright shimmer, and in his mind at night, tracked them to rocks and fallen ledges, fairy hollows and mossy places. Winter's first flakes press down on the backs of evergreen branches as they reach wide their tips in a graceful downward arc, alight with the weight of white. 53, alone in an abandoned car, tumbled from the flanks of joy. Rusted blood slows its course, clutched in the metamorphic heat of snow. And now I'm going to read a few books from my latest collection, Icarus, the Anthropology of Addiction. What I like about writing to myths is I feel like there's so many angles one can take. Even with the Icarus myth, there's so many directions you can come at it with. Icarus, of course, is the boy who flew too close to the sun with wings made of wax. His father was Daedalus, who made the wings. Daedalus also designed the maze at Crete. And they were escaping Crete when they took their fateful flight. The maze was the home to the Minotaur who consumed maidens. And Icarus had a mother that you almost never hear about, and her name was Nocrati. And they left her behind on Crete with the maze and the Minotaur when they took flight. So I have a series of poems centered around the Icarus myth and the issue of addiction. So the first one is called The Labyrinth. What if the famed maze of Crete were a tomb, a signifier of death in carefully crafted tile? But there is sex too, of course. Jeremiah bespoke entrapment in the Aegean pagan partridge dance, come to nest in Canaan, winged men spiraling outward, erotically hob-stepping to the moon goddess. Maybe the sun was jealous, blazing down on the boy's wax wings. And what about addiction? The way my husband would spin a web of words, linguistic dead ends, and illogic conclusions. I wanted out with my mind intact, so I followed the golden thread of words in hushed percussion nightly from my keyboard. And what about the Minotaur? Was he my husband or was he the addiction? And why does he stay there, consuming maidens, waiting to be slain? All right, it was just Halloween, and they were showing The Haunting on the movie channel. So this is called Shirley Jackson Was My First Analyst. Even before I read The Lottery in high school, my number was up. I'd come to believe the only way to pretend to be sane would be to marry Daedalus after all. I understood the odds stacked against women who began as awkward, introverted girls. Shirley laid out Eleanor Vance as exhibit number 1 in The Haunting of Hill House when I was 8, and my mother took me too young to see the film at the college campus. I learned that even mothers smother in their bitterness, that to be alone is the real cold dark of hell, that the underworld is not a light with flame and crowded in a shared camaraderie of misery. Shirley pressed upon me the danger of my own mind looking back at itself from the curved glass of a mirror, careening through off-kilter rooms crafted by men, that some spaces I dare not enter, libraries and domestic scenes most lethal. The voice in my head, lost in a labyrinth, would be loud as a jackhammer. My scream would be silent. Okay. Icarus Was My Brother. This is also an ekphrastic poem based on a piece of art by Christine Alfrey. Icarus was my brother. His love of vermilion marked him as my mad mother's favorite, a flavor affinity between the two of them. A shared recklessness seemed to string them together, strands of carnival lights on the beach on a hot summer's night. But their affinity could be chilled too, as in brilliant twin pop perfection, like when the sun paints the sky in colors of flame as it cools into the horizon of a hungry, roiling sea. Okay, this is the voice of Nocrati, who is the mother of Icarus. Ever the mother of Icarus, named power of the sea, but with no edge of my own, my boundaries are defined by other bodies. I've conformed to the contours of my children, their dreams and sadnesses. I've soothed and cooled the anger, sometimes flaring hot between disparate particles. I am the participle that describes nouns, a verb downgraded to an adjective. I'm the swelling tide. My thoughts are salt, a brine brim full on the brink of saturation. My children take chances. I want to hold them afloat. Okay. All right. Daedalus surfs Refugio Beach. I saw him there, gray hair and spine soldered stiff, but with nimble ankles to work the board. This is how he flies now, skimming the rising breast of the sea. He glides the high tide, rides the moon goddess in the full sun of morning, the sea permitting the light to penetrate only the high vaulting arc of the wave, blue giving way to beryl. but mostly the sea casts off the sun in a shattering of sharp sparkle, like a shriek of triumphant laughter. And when the wave he rides is almost spent, and the board careens one way and he the other, sideways or backwards, he washes up in the sizzle of white foam, not quite water, not quite air. He thinks he once knew free love, given and taken in patchouli moonglow rooms, thinks he knew his way around the maze. Now he kisses the sand and salt. Refugio, oh, Refugio. So now I'm going to share a couple more recent to finish out this session here. This one got an honorable mention in the Howe Prize this year. The Winter Dad turned basement archaeologist. Dad strips the ancient drop leaf table splayed upside down. I'm 10, and the long dark seeped into our narrow row house all afternoon, like the way Dad never spoke much, which frightened me, but sometimes he sang. Dad brushes a chemical slop across old paint, the color of tuberculosis, or maybe just sin. He sings, "It's been a hard day's night, and yesterday, love was such an easy game to play," as he knifes the blistering goop aside. Once Dad proclaimed that sin is inevitable, making that weekly Saturday drive to church inescapable. Our lungs have become the atmosphere's confessional booth. He and I lean over the table and strain to decipher the hieroglyphics of swirl and trail in the revealed sculpture of walnut wood. The air of Wisconsin's spring feels thin and sharp, like the fumes of solvent. On solitary walks, I scrape back the layers. And I'll finish up here with this poem. I got the Irish Fest prize last summer for this, the summer before last. Erin go bragh, whispered the four-leaf clover. Our street was an undersized litter box with no modesty cover. Danny swung hand over hand across the electric wires, connecting our house to the Slades. Walter Slade's teenage scream cracked open the summer haze when I pushed my fingers into his whirring push mower, which bit sharp and splattered red jewels against the green smell of cut grass. I ran hard down the back alley until I could taste all the rusty blades of Lancaster's East End. But I was the least impulsive kid around. My mother flipped her wig at the doctor who blamed her for Danny's hot dogging kicks all day long. It was his high IQ that made him so dumb. Like when he got the 5-finger discount on the bent slinky from the Slade's backyard, and Mrs. Slade raged all afternoon until my mother lost it and accused her of being German. My mom, the self-proclaimed Irish slob of integrity, by which she meant her derangements were always on point. Like when she marched up and down Clark Street, beating a big bass drum after mass that time, when you stood up and you said you didn't see any point to men and why should you have to marry one? Mom will one day imagine herself a reincarnated Emily Dickinson, the part about keeping to her bedroom and speaking rarely, but with unexpected punctuation. She'll say reincarnated too loudly into the screen of the confessional, causing the priest to give up darning his socks. So Erin go bragh, whispered the four-leaf clover, plucked from the small square of yard just ahead of Walter Slade's mower. So, thank you.